I suppose, like many of you, I've looked into this Apollo conspiracy, the belief that the moon missions never happened. And I think I first came across this back in the mid 1990s. I think 40 in Times had a couple of pages on the anomalies of some of the photographs brought back by the Apollo missions on the moon. And indeed, they did at the time look truly bizarre to me. And in the years since, I followed all the conspiratorial ideas and other things pertaining to the idea that the Apollo moon missions could never happen for numbers of reasons. Found them all very intriguing, but I still don't know for sure if they didn't go. I'm still inclined to think that they did go to the moon. Yeah, I know about the Van Allen belt. I know about the rudimentary and crude technology of the time. But I also know that there was plenty of brilliant people in NASA who could have done it. And so I'm not going to, right now, as far as I'm concerned, I believe that they did go to the moon. I also believe they faked some of the photographs, probably because the ones they took on the moon, maybe they came out very badly. And many of the things that people point to, like the lunar module, like who took the picture, well, it was Michael Collins, obviously, in the command module, and this kind of thing. But I want to take this whole discussion somewhere else into a completely different place. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence that even I couldn't turn a blind eye to was the Apollo 11 press conference and the behavior of the astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins. They are incredibly uncomfortable. They're just strange. Their body language is strange. How they answer the questions is strange. It just seems wrong. And I really don't blame people at all for thinking that maybe they're lying about the moon and they never went and they're having to lie to the whole world. I think if that was the case, they would have lied more effectively. But even someone like Buzz Aldrin, who in the years following the Apollo 11 mission was a very chipper character, very out there, very outspoken. But in that conference, he's just not himself. Now remember, these guys, when they joined the Apollo program, that movie, The Right Stuff, is pretty much bang on the money. A lot of them were wild guys, wild men, hardcore military Air Force guys, hard drinking, womanizing types. They were the pop stars of the scientific field in the 60s. These were not, the kind of people that would act and look and behave like they did in that press conference. So I played back the press conference the other night a couple of times, and I observed the body language first with the sound on, and then I did it with the sound off. And doing it with the sound off was very, very revealing. I don't see men who are lying. I don't see men who are ashamed that they're having to tell people they went to the moon when they didn't. You know what I see? I see three guys who've gone through a profound psychedelic experience and cannot express within their lingo, within their vernacular, within their level of linguistics, what exactly happened to them. They experienced something that very few human beings have ever experienced and probably ever will experience. And what it did to them has changed them profoundly. Michael Collins, the command module chief, even said something like, "You would need a poet, a philosopher, and a mystic to help us describe what we saw when we were up there." Now let's talk about the idea of being in a spaceship that goes outside Earth orbit. You're ostensibly trapped within a metal cave. You're in absolute darkness a lot of the time. You're traveling outside the magnetic influence of the Earth. and its relationship to the other astral bodies such as the sun and the moon. And we know that human physiology, human psychology, is heavily connected towards particularly the movement of the sun and the movement of the moon. The full moon, for example, we know the expression lunatics. The extra gravitational pull of the full moon pulls the water in the brain, causes brain pressure, and has people who are psychotic have visions and so on. Imagine going to the moon. What would that do to your brain? How come no one talks about this? It's very easy for conspiracy folks to suddenly go, oh, they never went to the moon, blah, blah, and the other. And if what I'm proposing actually happened, then NASA would be very happy with those conspiracy theories of not going to the moon, because it's easier to laugh that off or explain that than say that these guys underwent a profound psychedelic experience. Now, if you look at the Jungian idea of this, spreading in the whole idea of the collective unconscious, this is around the time you had like space rock and space oddity. The hippie era had just finished. You had huge numbers of people taking psychedelics, particularly LSD. You were having the beginning of all these spiritual awareness groups, and as well the other side of that, the Vietnam War and other conflicts around the world. But right in the middle of that, three guys go into a metal can and they're fired off towards the nearest body to the Earth, the moon. They fly through space, they escape Earth orbit and Earth gravity, and they move towards this thing that comes approaching towards them. Now, there's absolute silence in space. There's only a layer of thin metal between them and oblivion, literally oblivion. And then there's a lot of work to do, and then there's a lot of pressure, a lot of other things. And then they go to the moon, the lunar module comes out, it docks with the command module. The two astronauts who are going to the moon crawl into the lunar module, the LEM, and then that lands on the moon. He gets out, Neil Armstrong, he walks on the moon. Well, and suddenly it's all worked, the phenomenal pressure of being killed and everything has ended. Then they go back and they spend the night inside the command module. Now, anyone who's ever slept in a cave deep in the earth knows that you have tremendous psychedelic experiences. This is why we have cave paintings. This is why our ancestors, when they built souterrains and barrows and passage cairns to go deep under the ground to experience reality without the sun and without the cosmic cycles as far as they could get it. Imagine doing that inside a metal box on the surface of the moon with the earth rotating around you. Imagine what their dreams must have been like. No one ever talks about that. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night while they're sleeping and opening your eyes and saying to yourself, I'm sitting in a piece of metal on the moon. And all the profound and intense emotions that would stir up. Looking out the window of the command module across the lunar landscape as the sun is rising and realizing you're the first humans to have ever been on another body apart from the earth. Let that sink in. If you have any kind of soul or any kind of emotional depth, you'll suddenly almost be frightened to think of that. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself inside the lunar module on the moon. Probably just the simple sounds of like the air conditioning system, ventilation system, and a few electronic buzzings, but otherwise you are in the middle of nowhere, not even on the earth, literally. And then when the mission is over and you get back into the command module, then the command module heads back towards Earth and you see Earth getting bigger and bigger and bigger as you come towards it. And the gravitational shift changes from what you had on the moon to what's on Earth. And then you have the terror and excitement of the re-entry, which is so dangerous, especially with those days with the small landing capsule and the large heat shield on the back. You come in at phenomenal speeds, you're covered in fire, and then you land on a parachute in the middle of the ocean. Now, you tell me that's not an alchemical transformation. Earth, fire, water, ether, matter, it's all there, and your body is experiencing it like nothing else. Then you go into your isolation chamber and you're sitting there with the other two guys going, "Did you see that? What we saw in space?" You say, "Yeah." They talk about their dreams, and then when all the work pressures that they've been gone through, and all the discussion and all the preparation as military men and scientists that they've made, they're suddenly back on Earth, and it starts to hit them. Like when you've had a relationship and the relationship ends, or someone dies, you have those moments that you think it really, really hits you. It's not in the heat of the moment as much as afterwards. And then they're pushed into a press conference in front of the whole world, and they're still processing this deep psychedelic experience. Is it any wonder? Put yourself in their shoes. Is it any wonder they're acting and behaving the way they do? And this seems to be a commonality with the Apollo astronauts, and maybe the reason they never went back. Perhaps they never went back, not because they were faking missions or because it cost too much, but perhaps the technology that NASA had could not compensate for the psychological, emotional, and spiritual and psychedelic experiences that these men experienced. Now, it's not the same as being in orbit on, say, the International Space Station. It's very, very different. You're going outside the Earth's orbit. You are, in many ways, the ultimate shaman. They've experienced a level of shamanic intensity that is beyond anything possible on Earth through the most intense dancing, drum banging, meditation, and entheogens. It's impossible to get where they got to. Spare a thought for them. Think about them. Think about their the emotional and psychological conditions. Just think about what it was like to be one of them. Is it any wonder they're behaving as they do? And as I said, this is a common thing. Edgar Mitchell, who was on Apollo 14, came back profoundly changed to the point where he even started his own foundation to explore noetics and spiritual science. He took a great interest in altered states and other kinds of things like this. And it was all based on the indescribable, using his own words, experiences that he had while going to the moon and coming back. He could only use the term samadhi, the Hindu term for the highest sense of spiritual perfection. That's what they achieved out there. So just look at these videos again, and instead of invoking the conspiracy that they didn't go, like I said, I'm pretty sure they went, but I'm not an expert. And you don't become an expert by watching videos online if he actually went or not. But just look at them. And have you ever spoke with someone who's had a profound psychedelic or spiritual experience? Well, those guys at the Apollo 11 press conference is exactly how they behave, because I know that's happened to me when I've had like profound spiritual experiences at megalithic sites and other ancient places. You cannot, when someone says to you, what did it feel like? How can you describe the indescribable? Especially if they're being asked technical details pertaining to a mission, and your head is full of all these psychedelic flashbacks. And that's what I think happened at the Apollo 11 press conference.